Hello, everyone. Welcome to Surefire Live. Thank you guys for joining me tonight. Have some really fun, interesting guests tonight, which some of you probably have heard a lot about recently. I've talked about it a lot recently, gone through joining the Chimney Collective, and I've brought on my partners from this group to talk to everyone that wants to know about private equity and the investment into our chimney business. As weird as we are and as strange as we are, somebody thinks we are pretty cool. And I got two guys on here tonight that are going to be joining us. And so I'll bring them on in a minute. I will talk today. I had a group, the last 2 days, I've had a group of hearth retailers at my shop. And it's called a mixed group, a management information exchange group. And they had come from all over, and they came to my shop for the last couple of days. And they just worked on how they're going to build a service division, how they build service divisions, how they build better businesses. And everybody's interested right now, especially in building better businesses. And I have a program called Blue Collar University where we bring people in and we help your company grow. And recently, we're going to turn that into a program called Built to Sell, which is part of what we're going to talk about tonight, where we kind of work with your company for about 10 months to figure out where you are now, figure out what best companies are doing, what best practices are, and then also work for the most valuable company you have, whether you're ready to talk about exit now or exit in 5 years or not exit, but understand the value of your company. That's always important to know the whole time you're in business. So with that, as you know, this is a show where we bring you on. We don't bring you on live, but we use your comments. We talk to you through the comments. So please say hello. Please ask questions. And we use that to kind of superpower the show. We have some questions from people who send them in ahead of time. But other than that, we're just going to have a conversation, and please be part of the conversation, ask questions, and we would love to answer those. So with that, I'm going to bring on Branson, Tibbs, and Rhett, Hogan. Hey, guys.
Hey, Mark. How are you doing?
Good. What are you guys up to these days?
We're just meeting with chimney folks. So I'd say living our best life right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for joining me tonight. We have gotten to know each other quite well over the last several months to a year. And I just kind of wanted to introduce, I know you know a lot of people in the chimney industry. You know a lot of, here's Levi Bogue saying, hey, what's up?
What's going on,
You
Levi?
guys know Levi. Yeah. Hey, Levi, good to hear from you. A lot of people know you've been to the National Chimney Sweep Guild events. You've been to the Lindemann events. You guys have been to several events in the industry, but you guys aren't chimney sweeps. You guys found this thing, and I'd love to just kind of introduce you guys and tell people, a little bit where you come from, and then secondly, why chimneys? Why are you guys interested in this, and what do you think about all this?
Yeah, happy to. Rhett, you want to kick us off, and then I'll share how we ended up in the chimney industry?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. I think that I'm sure that is a question that's pressing on everyone's mind. And maybe I'll start by just saying that we've spent more than a year now. We've been close to this industry from sort of our earliest days, spent researching it and working through building relationships with people like Mark and others. And one of the kind of common threads through a lot of what we've spent the last year within those relationships has been us getting everyone else's journey to chimney, which it is sort of interesting most of the time. Like we have met folks who grew up in the industry and were otherwise born into it. But we've met many who were not, and that, in some ways their story was not dissimilar from ours in that, they found it by happenstance or by otherwise. And so maybe
I always say people find it through everything else failing. Like plan A through D failed and you just fell backwards into it. And here we are. And like we're a land of misfit toys, but we love what we do. So that's interesting that's kind of the experience you've had as well.
definitely a through line is that there is a unique journey that everyone's been on, or a lot of folks have been on to find themselves here, us too. And I'll leave some of the thunder for Branson on sort of how we got here, but that's been a real bright spot and a through thread of all of our work. And then, maybe the other thing I'd lead with as we think about this industry and the opportunity and how excited we are the people that we've met. So not only just their story for how they found Chimney, but the relationships that exist within this industry amongst the broader kind of participant set as we've gotten to know it. One aspect that's just continually been reinforced to us, and frankly, that sets a high bar of responsibility that we feel for how we will continue to give back to the industry and just be active participants in it, is how much there is support, through what Mark's doing here and otherwise. And we've met many other people too, away from Mark, frankly, that are similarly minded and postured toward each other in the industry and helping each other out. And Mark mentioned the mixed groups, and we've been around those kind of formal groups of people sharing notes, and we've been around groups of people informally sharing their notes just via relationships. And that's been really exciting for us. So we have this, everybody or a lot of folks have an interesting story getting in. I think that's reinforced this idea of we're in it together now that we've found it. And those two things have been, invigorating for Branson and I. And like I said, set a high bar when we were contemplating our partnership with Mark. It was not lost on us that he has spent the better part of his career, I think, attempting to sort of be supportive and be helpful to folks. And we endeavor to be the same and support him in continuing to do that. So we're excited to be here. Maybe I'll save some thunder for Branson for kind of how we actually got to Chimney ourselves.
I will say real quick, Levi says I'm a second generation myself. Jeremy Maynard says hello. On duty Chimney and Stove says gentlemen, hello. Andy Smith says yes. That part is really unique to this industry. We need each other, and it couldn't be more right. So with that.
If on duty, if that's Brian, then hello there, and hope to not steal his thunder, but congrats on the wedding.
Oh yeah, nice. Alan Rush, of course, been wanting to learn more about this. Seems too good to be true. What's the catch? Alan, listen to him. But yeah, so Branson, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then also tell us, why chimneys? What's interesting about this?
I'll start with the story. I think, how we ended up in this industry, which goes about 10 years when Rhett and I first met. So we were in New York. We were working at an investment bank called Houlihan Lokey. And so our role there, we were advisors to businesses that were going through kind of a big change in the life cycle of a company. And so these were companies, that were doing between $100 million to about $1 billion in revenue, that were going through a big kind of inflection point, whether they were looking to sell, buy another business, raise capital. And so our job was to be advisors to those businesses. Phenomenal experience. It's where Rhett and I really first built our relationship. And from that point, we ended up going separate ways. Rhett did a handful of really interesting things back in Nashville, where he's from. I had joined Morgan Stanley in the private equity group within the broader Morgan Stanley institution. I'd say the experience at Morgan Stanley was a pretty formidable experience for how we ended up here. A little bit about that group and the work that we did. We would make a couple of investments in businesses each year, and our job was to help those businesses grow and scale and hit kind of the next level of where they were heading. And Morgan Stanley made a lot of successful investments, but there was a pretty interesting through line in the investments that Morgan Stanley had made, which was that there were a handful of residential services investments. And those were some of, if not the most successful investments in companies within the broader Morgan Stanley institution. And so it was pretty formative. I'm sure many people in this industry have seen a lot of the excitement around some of these industries over the last 20 years, HVAC, plumbing, electrical. It was in 2023, though, where there was a pretty big light bulb moment as it relates to, where there's really great opportunities to invest behind folks and help to build really interesting companies. And that was when, I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar, but A1 Garage Door had come to market. That was Tommy Mello's business. And we had taken a look at potentially acquiring that business. And it was a pretty unique moment, I think, for a lot of people in the broader ecosystem, which is that so much of the focus had been around HVAC, plumbing, electrical. And here comes this gentleman who's built this unbelievably successful business doing garage door service and repair. And so a lot of people had never seen that industry, nor did they believe you could build a business to the size that he had built it. And so that process was unbelievably well attended. He did an incredible job, by himself and all of his employees as well. It was just a really, really great outcome. And so we and Morgan Stanley and a number of other folks took a step back and said, great, A1 went by. What's kind of the next big garage door services business? And it turned out that, as it related to $20 to $30 million EBITDA businesses in garage door, there wasn't one. Mm-hmm. And so the rest of the garage door services industry looked a lot like what the chimney services industry looks like today, which is that there's a lot of really good growing businesses that are regional. They're kind of sort of in their geography. Maybe they've got a couple locations, but they are largely kind of regional businesses. Maybe they have, up to 100 employees, but, nowhere near the size that Tommy had built. And so a couple of gentlemen from a different institution had gone out, and they went out and partnered with many of the best companies in the industry, and they built a business, and it was just unbelievably successful for, everyone involved, the partners, the employees of the partners, and so
still in garages though, right?
Still in garage. So we had seen that go by, and Rhett and I were speaking quite often at that point. I was still at Morgan Stanley, and I'll kind of give you the SparkNotes version of Rhett's background. But Rhett at that point was the CEO of a services business, and he had sold that on to another business, and so he was a free agent. And so Rhett had a lot of time on his hands, and he called me. And at the same time, we had both watched the sort of garage door industry go by and thought, man, there's a really exciting opportunity to do something in a market that's very similar to HVAC, very similar to garage doors, but hasn't yet had its moment there. And that was when I'll let Rhett tell you how we then ended up in Chimney, but that was when the sort of light bulb moment went on to say, hey, maybe it would be pretty interesting to go out and do something under our own names and do something in an industry that's kind of what we view as sort of next up.
Right. Yeah. So Rhett, I know this story, but you go ahead and tell everybody kind of how this whole thing happened.
Yeah. So I still am, but at the time I was living in Nashville then as well. And Branson and I had settled in on, a lot of the background that he just described. Okay. So we are very meaningfully interested in residential services. We're looking for within that a subvertical or an industry that's not HVAC, electrical, and plumbing, that's about the same size as garage door, that has characteristics that look like that. And from there, there was and there continues to be a fair amount of strategic thought that goes into organizing ourselves around a thesis. But once you have that level of organization, there is a bit of brute force, or it's pretty entrepreneurial from there. And so Branson and I had sort of an agreement that if we saw a service vehicle, a service van, a service truck, anything that was delivering services that we thought might be to a residential home, we would, take a picture and share it with one another and put it through kind of its early paces of due diligence for whether or not that would be an industry of interest for us. And lo and behold, I had dropped my son off at daycare, and I was driving back over to the office, and kind of on the interstate, pulling up beside me, there was an Ashbusters truck. And so while on the interstate, I'm taking a picture of this Ashbusters truck, and I sent it to Branson, and I was like, hey, effectively every home that I'm aware of has somewhere between 1 and 4 chimneys or fireplaces or something of the like. And I haven't thought a lot about it before, but it stands to reason that there's a lot of work to do around those. And so we started to put it through its paces, and we had a number of qualities that we would evaluate industries for. And, effectively we would line them up, these various qualities, against what we had seen work really well in those proven kind of tried and true areas of investment, things like HVAC, electrical, plumbing, lawn care, roofing, pest, right? And each of them have kind of varying flavors. But when we think about Chimney, I'll just give some color for what got us excited beyond the people, which is first. I started with people because it is of the utmost importance for us to begin with. But behind that, we think a lot about the quality of revenue within these businesses, and that decomposes into a couple things. We think a lot about the DIY, the do-it-yourself risk, meaning, what's the probability that a homeowner, if under duress of financial or otherwise, could they go out and cut their grass? Could they go out and tend to their pool? And how easy or hard is it for someone to do that? And when we thought about Chimney, I'm thinking about my wife and my children and the gas lines that are running from outside to inside my home and into the fireplace, and the probability of myself or my wife feeling good about me, tinkering with that, was very low. We were going to either go without or have a professional come in. And similarly, when I think about kind of the broader, wood burning stoves or other fireplace and chimneys and the masonry and being on a roof and tuck pointing and flashing, and frankly, just being on the roof and thinking about working on something even from the roof line that might be above my head was, again, effectively 0% probability that I would. And when I thought about the folks that I know, I felt similarly. And that there's a lot that kind of comes behind that when you think about the trust that a homeowner must place then. So they've decided they're not going to do it themselves. There's a read through on it, particularly with gas and fire and home safety and carbon monoxide and children, or even like your parents, if you're tending to them in your home. Either way, it's life and death in a lot of ways here. And so their homeowners search for quality and like their willingness to pay for quality and to go out and find who's the right provider of this service. That felt really positive to us about this industry. So DIY risk, we felt, was like super checked as we thought about revenue quality. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I don't know how much it is interesting to other folks, but this is what underpins our excitement. We think about technology, particularly artificial intelligence. There's a lot right now kind of just in the broader news cycle, both business and otherwise, as it relates to artificial intelligence. And we certainly wanted to be positioned on the right side of technology and specifically artificial intelligence. And we see, in fact, like in an ideal world, and it works oftentimes when there's like a risk lever that exists, if you're on the right side of it, it ends up being opportunity for you. And we see that here. There's, we believe artificial intelligence and broader than that kind of technology stands to benefit these operating businesses. Our businesses will benefit from the continued development of technology and artificial intelligence. And so that got us, that box was checked. You think about how easy is it to defer these services? This is related to DIY, but if something if something's wrong with my chimney or fireplace, can I defer it? And this is a spectrum, but generally when I think about a chimney leaking, or like my wall is hot, there's water intruding into my home, there's a brick in my backyard, that's a structural component of my home that feels like it's at risk. All of that to us felt like, again, on the spectrum, it was less deferrable than many other things, we had seen. And there's, so anyway, we put this thing through the paces, all that to say, I really do say all that for the folks that are on this call, kind of regardless of just to encourage you that, man, you're in a really interesting industry. And Branson and I start with industry, and then we work behind that to find great partners, like great businesses within the industry. But if you're operating here, the same reasons we're excited, I hope make you excited. So if nothing else, I hope you leave encouraged that, you have a lot of opportunity in front of you here. And we're fired up about it. I hope you guys are. Certainly you stand in good position as I see it.
As it was said earlier, our industry, and you're learning it now, we really do care about each other. We really do. It's not just a surface level thing. We really work with each other, cheer each other, because we are very kind of different. And you said some really great points. I don't know that we think of our industry as you do. Ryan Crenshaw up in Canada says it's truly an amazing industry. And Ryan is a young guy getting after it in Canada, trying to make Canada great again. But he is a fantastic operator and sees those opportunities as well. But it's just neat to see people from, I've been in it 41 years, but some people have been at it a couple of years. You guys are brand new in it and seeing it with fresh eyes. And I really like seeing the industry through your eyes as well. So that's exciting. I know there was some, and maybe you could help me with this, but you guys had said at one point something about the value of like tech versus home services, like how much more money there was to invest in home services. I can't remember what it was, but it was interesting why home services are now so much more on the spectrum for private equity and for investment, and why all of us are getting all these calls from everybody that wants to all of a sudden buy our business. So we don't know, I personally was just saying no to everybody because I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know if they're a scam. I don't know if it's the wrong time. So why is there's this I see why you guys got interested. Why in general home services has become such a hot item?
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting because, right, a lot of that has now sort of come to the chimney industry. But if you run an HVAC business, you've been experiencing that now for 10 to 20 years as that industry has sort of grown and matured. And as you think about kind of broader home services, right, doing anything to the home, that is a $1 trillion industry. And so there are a lot of really good businesses, across those industries. We referenced Tommy's business, and that's a great business in the garage door services industry. We look at some of those other verticals that Rhett talked about, and there are similar operators that are building really special businesses and supporting their employees in those industries. And I think what happened and what the industry's seen over the last 20 years is that by virtue of, and so a lot of what the model is and the way that, we and anyone else that is investing in this industry thinks about it is when you bring together a number of really good operators in any given industry, there's a lot that goes on behind that. And I'm sure, Mark, you've experienced, and many people here have experienced in their business, that when you go from 100,000 of revenue to $3 million in revenue, the number of resources that you can afford at your business to support you step up. At $3 million of revenue, you're starting to invest in managers. You've got kind of another layer. You also have other people in the field who are providing those services. And then as you go from 3 million to 6 million, you've got an even larger sort of managerial kind of layer there. And that helps to support the business. And you as a leader get freed up to continue to work on your highest and best use. And then you think about some of the largest businesses in this industry and what those organizations look like and the amount of talent that they have. Well, it doesn't stop at the kind of largest chimney services business. And so you can imagine that at $100 million of revenue, the number of sort of resources that any business is then able to afford is meaningful. Every industry is different, but when you think about the chimney services industry, it breaks down across a couple different vectors, which is that, are you getting the calls? Are you converting those calls? Are you getting in the home? Are you converting the sales? And then do you have the production, the labor to go out and do the production? And all of those are really complicated problems. And we speak to so many people in this industry, and everyone's got a different thing that they need to solve. Some people are getting the calls, but they need to convert them better. Some people are converting them well, but it's about, getting the labor recruited and trained. And so you can imagine the larger businesses, the more you can invest in those specific items, which help support a business. And so, in any sort of company, as you are larger, the opportunity to then have an entire team that's focused on talent acquisition, right? They're there to say, you're budgeting, you're forecasting, you're saying, how are we going to do next year? How are we thinking about it? Great. Let's get a lot of talent. Let's get them trained. Let's share a lot of best practices through a lot of businesses to ensure that we've got the right people. Now let's make sure they're happy. And I think a lot of people in this industry do a great job retaining their people really well. It is like that same sort of spirit of business owners giving back. I think that disseminates really well down into every organization, most organizations we've met. But as you can put more resources and people that are focused on solving that issue, then the amount of time that, an owner and a business leader needs to spend on recruiting, and then same with marketing and same with sales, goes down, and that element of the business, only gets better. And so that as a playbook, right, which is that as you build scale, you invest more resources in the business, then you're able to, grow, take market share, drive greater penetration in this industry. Like Rhett said, every house has a chimney on it, but the number of people that are even familiar with this service is pretty small, right?
Yeah,
and so as you grow your business, your marketing goes really far. You're not just getting in front of people who have an immediate need, but you're able to educate the market more, drive greater penetration. And so you're able to grow your business by growing the industry as you reach scale. And that has been really successful for many, many years now across the sort of home services, different industries, for the people who have been involved in those organizations as they've grown and invested behind their people.
I was today I was working with some hearth stores that were at my shop, and we were working on things that they needed to do, and one of the owners is like, well, I need to hire 6 people. And I'm like, you got to hire 6 people. And I said, who's going to do that in your company? He's like, well, I kind of have to do it. I said, you have to do it. He said, yeah. I said, wow, what a amazing use of your time in a terrible way, because to get 6 people, you're going to probably have to go through 200.
Yeah.
And as an owner of the company, to be tied up in that, that part of it, to build your company. And, what you're saying is like, well, no, you stay in your best, field, your best use. And then we've got people that will help you with all those things. And they're better than you could hire on your own. Like I can hire good people, but with this group of chimney companies, we can hire the best person that may be even available. And now you move at a much faster rate. I remember when I hired my first, fractional CFO, and he was about as good as I could hire because I could only afford so much. So that was as good as it could be. And then I remember when we had a full-time CFO, and I remember it's a 6-figure guy. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so expensive. How am I going to hire somebody like that? It's coming out of my money. And then and then as you grow up, you can afford better and better talent and systems and things you couldn't afford. But as a group, all of a sudden your dollar goes a lot farther, your spend is a lot broader, and your talent that you get becomes more than you could ever afford or be on your own. And I think that's kind of what you were doing. I've seen that a lot myself.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say one more thing, which I'm sure you've experienced that, Mark, where you are today, and you've got this really good sort of group of leaders within your business. And I'm sure every one of those were jobs that you were doing at one point, and now they've sort of
and not well either.
Right. So now they're focused on it, right? They're good at that thing. They focus on that thing. And that's allowed you to free up and do all the things that you do so well. You've got multiple locations. You've been able to, invest across the industry. And like, if you were sort of in the weeds every single day, interviewing 200 people, you have to do that to get to where you are. But as you then bring on more talent, it frees you up as a leader to go after your highest and best use.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And it makes a lot of sense now. We're interested, like I said, a lot of us are getting constant, talk about, people are talking to us about it. We're trying to figure this out. Can you tell people, you guys formed a partnership, and then you went out and you formed this thing called Chimney Collective that I'm part of now, and others are coming on board with it. Can you talk about what that means? And there was a question before the show, as you get into talking about Chimney Collective, there was a question about what do you think the market cap on this group is? I'll make sure that it was from Eli from Mid Valley, but what do you see on the bigger thing for the collective you're building? And there's some others in the area, but what are you guys building with Chimney Collective, and what is that exactly?
I'm happy to take that's there's a lot. There's a lot in there, so I'm excited to talk about it. I'm sure I'll leave some room for Branson. I'll just, sort of speak a lot probably about what we've talked about, Mark, and kind of from Branson. I'll start by saying Branson and I have worked very hard in every conversation and relationship that we've had or built in this industry to be very straightforward and cards face up. And part of why we're here is we feel that we feel that way all the time, and want to make sure we honor that, and we place there is nothing more important than our reputation here. And so we we believe that what it looks like to live that out is to be cards face up and speak from the heart where and when we can. And so when I think about what we're building, look, we're setting out to build what we hope to be the industry leading chimney and fireplace services company. We, Branson and I oftentimes look to reset our own expectations to make sure that we're grounded in the present and the reality, but also have aspirations. Like we're very ambitious about what we think the opportunity is here. And we look across and we have a lot of insight into the broader residential services category as Branson, and we have discussed now. And we see, there are well north of 50 HVAC, electrical, and plumbing platforms now that are valued at, more than $1 billion. Some of them more than $10 billion now. One recently just was invested in at a valuation.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult. I want to be clear that even for me, and maybe it's a little easier for Branson, he's got even a better facility with numbers than I do, but it's sometimes hard for me to comprehend and really put into perspective for myself, like what that means, and then how that, what that means for us here in Chimney and Fireplace Services, and what that means for each person that we're talking to tonight and otherwise. But suffice it to say, we believe that there's room here to build the industry is larger than $1 billion by a multiple of that number, and we aspire to build something really special. So we have ambitions, and we are very clear-eyed in that it is only possible with great partners, and that, again, we started with people, and I'll probably continue to harp on it over the balance of tonight, because Branson and I are only two people, and frankly, we don't have a Chimney and Fireplace Services company on our own, and we hope that what we are for folks that do is, we're complementary. When I think about great partnerships, Branson and I are complementary in many ways. We're similar in some ways, and we're different. Our circles overlap enough to make good friendship, but they're different enough to still be helpful to one another. And I think similarly about our relationship with our partners, Branson and I have grown up and spent our time, and our passion is business building and helping folks achieve their highest and best potential and applying ourselves in that way. And then we view an opportunity that, we can be good partners to someone who's very excellent at Chimney and Fireplace Services business operations, and that those things together can build something really special. But that's what we're setting out to do. I think, when I think about what we are, I think about we're purpose built for Chimney and Fireplace Services. We want to be partners to owners who are looking for a growth partner. I think like that's another sort of, we are growth investors. Like when we think about what we do, we want to help people achieve their goals, help them grow their business. We believe the reason for doing so is to create value so that we can continue to reinvest in those businesses. A lot like Branson said, we're people. So we see a meaningful share of that investment back into the business being in more people and providing hopefully more financial and other opportunities, responsibility for the teams that sit behind people like Mark and the others on this call that are very likely business leaders. But maybe I'll pause there, because I have 1,000 things I could say, but maybe that gives you some view of where we are.
So, basically you're forming a group, and it is the best. I looked at the research you guys did into our industry, even the first time I met with you, and you had really identified fantastic companies. You'd done a lot of pre-research on who you wanted to talk to, who you thought were good operators, who do we need to, open up a relationship with and see if there's a connection there. And I was just amazed at your due diligence before you came on. And I know that it's learning every single relationship you have, you learn more, but in that research, in your identification of each company and in your meetings, what are you looking for? What do you want? And one of the things that I know that you were looking for was a dynamic business owner that wants to grow the business. But what are you looking for?
Yeah. It's almost going to sound like a cliche at this point, but like we start with the leader at the top of that business, and like we cannot do a good partnership unless we have really strong alignment with that partner and with the leader of that company. And so frankly, like we start with people, and that's why every time we go into a partnership, we spend a lot of time sitting down with the owner, sitting down with the business leader, and like frankly just understanding what are their goals. What do the next 5 years look like for them? What do the next 10 years look like for them? What do they want for their people, right? There's a lot of talent in these organizations, and what do they want for those people? And so our view is, first and foremost, if we can get really good alignment with the leader and where they want to go, then our ability to support them is much more meaningful. Rhett said it, but we are growth investors. And so our goal here, is many, but when we think about going into a partnership, we like to think about, how do we take some of the things off of your plate, help you kind of bear the burden of some of what it is to be a business owner, but also free you up with resources and with just partnership to hit your growth goals, right? We've got a way that we can think about it. We've got, 8 other partner businesses that kind of come together, and everyone's done something uniquely well. And so whether it's us or it's you, Mark, or one of our other partners, like there's a lot of really good perspective here. So we start there. I'd say then, behind it, I mentioned the sort of people under, and there's a lot of ways you sort of get at that. But we like to look at, what does your team look like? How has your team grown? How long have your employees been with your business? I think that's everyone will say they have a great culture, but when you look at, how long are your technicians and your salespeople staying with the business, it's going to be a really good indicator for how you treat your people, how you treat your employees. And then behind it, so that's kind of the qualitative aspect. Then there is a quantitative aspect to say, where is your business in its life cycle? And there is a point for both us and for business owners where it makes more or less sense to go into a partnership. And that is the business now to a level where our ability to extend value for doing a partnership is exciting to that other person. And so we really try to go into any of these partnerships in a way where everybody's excited. We want all of our partners to also be a meaningful owner in Chimney Collective. And so every one of our partners has reinvested a meaningful portion of the proceeds that they receive back into Chimney Collective. And what that means is that they benefit as we all do well. Mark,
that's exciting.
Yeah, you benefit, Mark, when our other partners do well. They benefit when Ashbusters does well. And it's been really remarkable to see. And I think that's resonated. I know it was something you talked about in one of your earlier shows, but as we've done these partnerships, the way in which our partners and business owners have then taken some of the value and sort of extended that deep into their organization. We were running the math, and I want to say we've got something like 50 people that are not the owners that are participating in the equity value creation in these businesses. And so that's really awesome to us. And it really just allows everyone to get buy-in. It's important for us to be clear with our partners on where are we heading? How do we get there? What's it going to look like? And so that way we're all sort of, aligned, excited for the future. And everyone's really clear on what they're looking to achieve together.
I did that with my group. I don't mind saying it that, as we form this partnership, I didn't want it to be, well, this is something Mark's doing or something Mark did, and here we are sitting here. I brought them along for the ride, and I think Alan brings up a point to this, and I wanted it to be, if Mark's excited about it, they're going to be excited about it too. And if I say that Chimney Collective is growing, they're like, go Chimney Collective. It means something to them too. So Alan says this. He says, the number one question I get from my clients is, I don't want to sell out, and my people and culture are the most important. Can you talk about what the company and current people look like if they chose to partner with you? It's a great question, and a great kind of segue into how does this affect companies and most importantly for a lot of us, our employees.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So thanks, Alan. I think first and foremost, there's a few things that we sort of, would never touch and don't touch. And that is right. We talked about how do we find the right partners, and it starts with people, right? And so there's an element of when we go into a partnership with the business, we are doing that partnership based on a lot of diligence that they are a good, upstanding person, that their people have stayed with the business, that the other folks in the Chimney Collective can reference them and say, I think really highly of them. And so in doing so, what we are doing is we're partnering with good, growing, strong businesses. And that allows us to put a lot of faith in those business owners that they are running a good culture, that they are good people, that their employees are happy. And so we never want to touch that. And so as part of joining Chimney Collective, we believe a lot in local culture, right? Every business does something special, and we would never try to interfere or touch any of that. We believe a lot in local brands. If we change, Ashbusters has 40 years of history, and if we said that, all right, Ashbusters' new name is X, you lose a lot of brand equity in your community with your employees. People are proud to work for Ashbusters, and we would never want to interfere with that. And so those are the things that we don't touch. I think ultimately, and it gets back a little bit to the prior question, but we believe a lot in, right? Change is scary until you understand it. And so we believe a lot in just spending time with the leaders and with the people in the businesses that we are backing, making sure there's sort of no stone unturned. We'll spend as much time, we'll be in person with that next layer of employees, with anyone who wants to talk to us. And we've had many employees come with just a list of questions, and just run through the list. And we've got all the time in the world for that, because it's really important for the folks that we're partnering with, not just the owners who made the decision to do this, but the people that they're supporting, to understand where we're heading, to understand how this makes their life better, to understand why there's going to be more opportunity as part of the collective. I saw Levi asked if people could transfer to other companies if they were to move, and like, absolutely. And even more behind that, right? We believe a lot in, as we grow and bring on more partners, the opportunity to go after new markets, the opportunity to bring people along who are really ambitious and want to have an opportunity to step up and be a general manager and take on more leadership roles, is there. And so we believe a lot in just investing behind what makes businesses great, but we would never try to sort of, touch it or change it, because that's the quickest way for things to not go well. We believe a lot in our partners and what they've already built without us.
Go
ahead. I think that is the big worry. So go ahead, Rhett.
I was just thinking like a few things to just, evidently my reputation precedes me with Mark and his business, because when I was there recently, I was prefacing that I sometimes like to talk, and they were nodding along like they had been told that before. So I'm doing my best here to sit on my hands where I can. But like on culture, like kind of said another way, the reason we are partnering with the businesses that we are is because of their culture. Mm-hmm. We are interested because the culture is strong. So it stands to reason. It's not that we wouldn't touch it. It's that we're there because it's great. I mean, that is why we wouldn't touch it. But like, we're there and interested because the culture is good. We were just on today with a very successful multi-hundred million dollar residential services business operator builder today. And he was redirecting me and Branson away from some priorities that weren't people, culture, hiring, team, ops strategy. Like, these things were what he was focused on and how he was successful. And so just to be abundantly clear too, like this culture idea, we're there because it's good. Like, we want to celebrate, reinvest in the culture, support it. A couple other things, like I was trying to think of like, man, how do I boil down just like a few key words, takeaways for way back? It's like 2 questions ago now, for what we're looking for in these businesses or what's valuable in them. And Branson mentioned the partner, and I've now mentioned culture. But I just thought some other things, like, and he mentioned brand too, but just to be clear, we are so proud of the partners that we have, meaning these founder, owner, operators that are around the table with us. There are others that are great in the industry, but I am meaning we don't have the only ones that are, but I'm absolutely sure that ours are great. I'm so proud of them, and they're remaining, in effectively all cases in our situation now, or the vast majority. And I expect that will continue to be the lion's share of sort of what we're doing here. And again, it is because of how much we oftentimes value. I say oftentimes, it is not unusual for us to maybe place incremental value on the place that founder, owner, operator holds within their business and within the culture iconography of like what's going on there than even they do. They may see themselves, like Branson said, as having elevated their business and elevated themselves into this cultural icon and executive. And that can be true, but we talk a lot about, and I sort of apologize for doing it to Branson sometimes so frequently, but we talk a lot about these owners being, and founders and operators with them, kind of the leaders there being these trees that it may not be abundantly obvious. Like, you may not be in the truck, you may not be driving sales directly with the homeowner, you may not be laying brick anymore, but you are this big oak tree or some tree that you value that is providing a lot of shade for your operators to go out to market and know that if they run up against a customer, if they run into a hard problem, if there's something going on at a work site or otherwise inside of a sale, that they can call you. And just that sort of shade that is provided is super valuable. And like, we believe a lot in it. And I'm reinforcing this because I do think it's it's a pretty big front of mind concern for our potential partners. And I just want, again, I want to be clear that we're there because of the business being excellent, because the brand is 40, 50 years old. It's multi-generational. It's the family's name on the wall. As Branson said, it's the last thing we're going to do to change it. In fact, we want to invest, celebrate, drive home more of that culture, hopefully retain that owner, operator, founder with us, have them be invested beside us, bring their employees along. Like, there is just nothing more important. Like, that is the whole game for us. Branson and I cannot be those people. We can't replace those people. We can't replace those brands. It's why we're here, because they are valuable on their own right.
I think that's very well said. I think too, let's talk about like what people worry about, like you guys said, as we started going down this path, there's a lot of ghosts. People worry about a lot of things. And it's not that it's totally unfounded. If you do research, you hear nightmare stories, you hear private equity came in and ruined this and did that. And I'm here to say I've been with you guys a lot, and I know that you're not, what you value and what you're working on was the same for me. And I got, I got a lot of alignment, and I believe, we're doing the right thing and some of the decisions you guys made to make that better. But, what are the things you hear that people are really scared about? And clearly it's employees, that you're going to cut my employees down, and that's how you're going to make your money, is you're going to squeeze us down. And this is where I'm going to lay off all my office staff, and we're going to consolidate it all. And I know that's not your plan, but talk about, what you've seen and what you were going to make sure doesn't happen, besides just, yes, the brand name, you're going to keep it, but what are in the culture, but overall, like, what does that look like?
Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely don't think that those fears are unfounded. It's at this point, private capital at large is a $5 trillion industry. And so to put that in context, wow, the chimney services industry is about a $5 billion industry, give or take. And, two chimney businesses are the same. There's such differences across chimney services businesses. And so you can imagine in an industry that is orders of magnitude larger, that there's a lot of differences in how people approach partnerships and effectively their model. When we think about the way that we try to approach our partnerships and the things that people are nervous about, you called it out, Mark, but people is a big one. And I like to tell folks, like, most of the time on my first or second conversation with the business owner, they're going to ask me point blank, are you going to lay off my people? And I always let them know that I was waiting to hear that question, because that tells me a lot about who you are, what you value, what your concerns are, and that you're really in this to protect your people and grow your business. And not that, you're trying to sort of cash out of your business and get out and toss us the keys. And so I view that as a really valuable question. The short answer to that is absolutely not. And when we think about investing into this industry and where there's a lot of opportunity, we will have many more people than we will have, in the next year, in the next 2 years, in the next 3 years. We are consistently hiring and adding people. And it's really simple, right? Like, as we think about the partners that we have, like I'm sure they wish they had 10 more people. Everybody's a little bit short staffed. And right. So to think that, right, we are growth investors. We think that every one of our partners can be, some amount larger than they are today. And we're going to help them get there and ensure that they share in the value that's created in getting their business there. And so to think that we could do that and have fewer people is just, it would just,
doesn't make sense.
It would never make sense. B, you sort of have to, you also have to sort of like look yourself in the mirror and say, like, how do I, what do I want to do? What do I want my legacy to be? And like, we believe a lot in this industry, and we're going to be investors in this industry and building Chimney Collective for the very, very long term. And so as we think about what do the next 10, 15, 20 years look like for Chimney Collective, like clearly the amount of people and business infrastructure that exists within the organization, we need to invest a lot right now to get us to where we're all going. Rhett talked about what these HVAC businesses look like, and that took them 20 years. And if we want to build on the same growth trajectory, that means not only not letting anyone go, but that is, how do we get them better benefits and more opportunity? And we've seen some businesses doing some really unique things to help further incentivize people who are really strong performers. Those are all investments on day one, right? Those are all investments that we make because we believe that there's a really good long-term payout on those things. And so I think the people question is probably, worries 1 through 5. And I think it's just, I can't reiterate enough that like services businesses are people businesses. And so if you do not have your people who are delivering the service, growing your business, like you're never going to get to where you're heading.
So we've been at it about 50 minutes. I normally do an hour show. We may run longer if you guys can, but if you can't, totally understand. I had a couple questions. One, which was, what if somebody's watching this show and they're like, I'm too small for them to think about, or I've got a bad year, or my profit isn't where I was. like, what would you encourage people to do? Should they still reach out and talk to you? What is a certain level or size you're looking at? That's the one question. Like, what if they don't feel they're ready time-wise? Secondly, you said you're going to be in the industry for a long time. Is there a window that people need to be understanding this, and what's that look like? So size and window, if you guys could talk about those two things.
Yeah. You want me to take it? I feel like we're taking turns, B. So that's fine. I'm happy to go, and you can fill in. Okay. Size wise, I think. Look, let me a couple things in there. There were kind of a couple certain questions wrapped into one. What's our target size? If they're not of that size, should they have a conversation, or like how should they think about that? And then otherwise, if they're just generally not sure about whether they're ready, or if they've had a down year.
Because I wasn't totally ready. When you guys came to me, I had just moved buildings. I had invested a ton of money. I had just rebranded. I had gone to, like, when you came to me, I, in my mind, wasn't totally ready for this conversation either. So, if I felt like I wasn't ready, I'm sure a lot of other people feel that way too.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, I can think of a few examples in my life. I'll leave them nameless or sort of remain anonymous on what they are. But there are some, anything, the sort of level of importance, the weight of something important tends to bring with it this idea of like, am I ready? And it's difficult to feel ready. For me, it's like thinking about having children, right? And you hear all the time, like, well, you're never going to feel ready, so you should have them because they're amazing. But this idea, right, the weight that is because you recognize, man, it's a big decision. I've spent a lot of my life contemplating it, and am I ready to kind of step onto the other side? And I think that's super natural, particularly as it relates to a business that someone has built over any amount of time, frankly, whether it was built in the last couple of years or built over the last few decades or a couple generations of a family. And it probably changes, over the weight of that decision is probably different across those points that I just described. So I think everybody, so just to be clear, if you're feeling that, I think that is normal. And I don't think that I would allow that to preclude, you are continuing to sort of get to know and understand what the opportunity is and what the situation is broadly in the industry. Branson mentioned, and I'll say again, like, we intend to be here for a long time, and definitely a large part of the, what we thought about our underwriting, if you will, of when we were thinking about the industry has it been around? And I recognize this industry from a professionalization standpoint is relatively new compared to others. But like, people have been, like, fireplaces, chimneys, burning wood, heat, all of that has been around for forever, effectively. And I expect that it will continue to be around for a long, long time. And so for that, and that's part of why we chose to build here, meaning Branson and I, to toil away and be at what we're doing, be in this industry. So we're going to be here for a while. We would not want anyone to feel any undue at all pressure or anything related to that. To the extent you're interested, Branson and I we try to be, as much as we can, I like to think we're learner postured. And so if that's you and you want to sort of step into a conversation, that's like always available. And Branson and I love that. Like, we are kind of living our dream job now and doing this and out building relationships with folks and building this business. And a huge part of that is having conversations with folks, learning about them, learning about their business, contextualizing where they are in their geography, where they are in their building business, where they are personally in their life, like in the stage of life that they're in. And within that, thinking about, is there a way we can be, we can be helpful to them in any way? And we said at the top, and I'll say again here, we do not intend for it to be that, we're not helpful to folks who aren't on the platform. There's a clear benefit to, hopefully, like, we hope to prove how good the benefits are of being on the platform, but we do endeavor we're going to be helpful, just like the folks that we look up to in this industry have been helpful long before Chimney Collective came. And we intend to be helpful for all of the time that we're here as Chimney Collective and support our partners in doing the same. So for me, that's just learning. If you want to understand better about what's going on, or if something that we said tonight piques your interest and you just are curious about some small corner of the world that we are in, please reach out. Like,
you guys could maybe post your contact information in the chat so people can see it. And, if you guys want to talk to them individually or through a phone call, they've been super helpful. I mean, roughly how many chimney company owners do you think you've talked to? 100? Like,
more than that?
Well, more than 100. I mean, we had the opportunity to tour the facilities and sit down and have dinner with 100 business owners. And like, man, we're learning something new every time we get the opportunity to visit someone's shop and see how they do things. And it's really helpful. There's a lot of things we take back from every one of those meetings for how our partners can, stuff we might bring to our partners. Most of the time they already know it because you've all been in this industry for much longer, but occasionally we find a nugget in there. But I mean, we've spoken to, well north of 100 business owners, and many instances, like Rhett said, like there is a really genuine interest in finding a path to a partnership, and it might just not be the right time. And that is more than okay, and we'll invest as much time as we have with those folks, and just try to help them see, like, if they'd like to join Chimney Collective, like, what does that path look like? Where do they want to take their business? That way, when we go into that partnership, it's exciting for everyone.
We have a question from Matt. Hey, Matt, good to see you, buddy. I don't know if you're going to Italy in about a month, but if you are, maybe I'll see you there. If not, Matt runs a chimney company out of Colorado, and he says, are Chimney Collective companies only service-based, or are they also involved with brick and mortar hearth stores? Very good question. Very relevant question.
Great question. The answer is both. So I think today our partners lean more heavily on the services side, many of which are services businesses who have a showroom, though we've found, there's obviously different models, and, Mark, you referenced it, but you've been spending a lot of time with hearth store owners kind of recently and over your career in helping them, see the value and drive greater services. And we've seen a lot of folks do that unbelievably well. And so we think there's value in kind of both sides of the business. And we're happy to have the conversation with anyone.
Yeah. Obviously service base is what that's a lot of the value, but hearth definitely can add to it and help it, as long as you have a strong service core with that. Not just, some hearth stores don't service their own units. They service is this big and hearth is this big, and that's not nearly as interesting or at all interesting as large service, and at least equally as large, or the service side needs to be really healthy for you to really look at it, right?
And we think a lot, there are like this is where conversations are helpful, meaning if Matt wants to have a conversation, we stand ready just to talk with him about it. Maybe Matt has something we should learn. We'd happy to go into many details, but when we think there are lots of qualities about, are you selling to, contractors? Like, do you have a business to business relationship with general contractors or new home construction, or are you selling hearth and fireplace, either appliances and or services, into existing residential homeowners, right? There are lots. What you learn is, like Branson said, it's a big industry in its own right. It's obviously inside of a larger residential services industry, but every business is unique. And we have found that some folks may think of themselves as more hearth and fireplace, but when you do get into a conversation with them, it turns out they interestingly are servicing an existing residential homeowner. They do have some service offerings. They value those things. That's interesting, right? And we think a lot about, like, or at least I think a lot about it. I think Branson probably does too. I don't want to speak for him, in any meaningful way, but we think about, like, being in these residential, like, interfacing with residential homeowners, and are we able to provide a full service offering for them, right? Do we have at our disposal and with our partners the ability to deliver into that home anything that they need that touches a fireplace, chimney, stove, hearth, you name it? In an ideal world, we can solve their need, right? And that we're able to do it in a really high quality way.
Yeah.
Within that, it's a pretty wide ranging thing. Some folks may need a gas insert, other folks may have tuck pointing, right? Like it's pretty broad scope of services and products that we might,
I hear some little ones in the background.
Can you? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, they're getting wild. We're like approaching bedtime. Which is,
you've had Dad on the call for an hour. We are ready for dad time.
Children are fascinating, and the closer they get to bedtime, the louder and like more energetic they become before they just kind of fall over, and you're like, wow, that was wild.
Yeah. How old are your children?
Henry's about 2 3/4, if you will. He's between 2 and 3, closer to 3. And Eloise is turning 1 in about 8 days.
You're right in the middle of it. Yeah, that's hot. At 8 days, she's turning 1. Yeah, my grandson's about to turn 1 as well. So, Well, anything else that you think we're coming to? And I really, really appreciate your time. I think you guys shed a lot of light on this. And we've got a few more minutes. If you want, is there anything you think we need to make sure we talk about or that I didn't hit on? Anything that you can think of that we should say? I didn't. Let me just say this. I didn't see any links. Did you guys want to give those to me and I post them, or did you?
Why don't
Why
don't we send it over to you, Mark?
Okay.
I'm not able to post in the chat, so I'll
I gotcha. I will say this too. I'm going to post this built to sell. These guys are part of this program. This is you can go to surefireb2s.com and you'll get to speak and meet with them quite a bit. And they're part of this program to get businesses ready and pour into them. And these are two founders of the Chimney Collective. So, but yeah, sorry to interrupt, but was there anything that you thought you would want to leave tonight with?
This has been really enjoyable. We've obviously been speaking for a long time, and so I think you hit the right questions. There's really nothing I can think of that I think was left unaddressed. So I really appreciate you having us on, and obviously everything you do for the industry. We love this industry. We're going to be a part of it for a long time, and we love the people in this industry, and so we're excited to be here. Long-time listener of the podcast, first-time guest. So pretty special to say.
Yeah. All right, guys. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I think if we were leaving the folks here with anything, it's just that we hope you'll know that we're looking to build authentic relationships with this industry and be active participants and feel as though we have really purposefully partnered with, businesses already that we think hold a very high bar of responsibility for Branson and myself to uphold and make sure we're working every day. We make a few promises, but certainly one of them is that, we're bringing everything we have every day to the table here to support our partners in this industry.
I was always surprised how young you guys are, but how knowledgeable you guys are. And every time I talk to you, I learn something. And I can't believe you guys are as young as you are, but you know so much. But obviously you've been around and like a lot of high-powered situations, and you bring a lot of really depth knowledge into what we are doing. And we have our own knowledge. You guys have your knowledge. And I'm always excited to hear from you guys, because it's almost like any certain problem I throw at you guys, you're like, well, you would just do this and this and work around it. And in the mixed group that was at my shop today, one of the technicians was like, man, it just seems like you got an answer for it. You know how to fix all these problems. I'm like, 41 years, I better know how to do it. But you guys are the same way. When I throw what feels like a crazy twist at it, you're like, well, we would just do this and you work around it this way and we can work through that. Like, I love that. And you guys have answers to things. It's like you guys are like, the answer is yes. Now what's the question? You guys figure out how to get through it. So I really love that about the way you guys operate. So, well, guys, thank you so much. Get back to those little kids and get back to the wives, have the kids go to sleep. And we really appreciate you guys and thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate the kind words.
See you guys. All right, guys. Well, that's the partners of mine in the Chimney Collective. I hope you enjoyed and learned a lot from that. Why chimneys? Why now? Why? And really, it's really just about time. I could tell a couple of years ago that private equity was going to find us at some point. Like I said in the past, they were over in Europe working. They were wrapping up companies in Sweden and all these other companies. And they were saying, and this has nothing to do with them, but they're like, it's going to come to the United States. Well, that company didn't necessarily, but you could see others starting to move this way. And I think we got really lucky with Branson and Rhett choosing this home services division to start investing in and looking at. I certainly feel that way. And I think as you listen to them and talk to them, you understand they're not some weird, scary group. They are not somebody trying to come in and ruin the industry. They are, here to help it and help it grow up. And some of the natural things that are going to happen as our businesses got better, we get more sophisticated, we get more valuable. Other people want to look at that and see what we're doing, because it's not easy to do, as we all know. But hopefully that was an enlightening conversation with the guys behind Chimney Collective. Obviously, we're working with them on Surefire, and we're excited for that. So you can reach out to me too. My email's mark@ashbusters.net. Be happy to answer any questions or put you in contact with the partners if you'd like to talk to them. Had several thank yous. Thank you guys. Good stuff. Great talk. Yeah. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon. Oh, I will say I won't be here for probably the next couple weeks. Next week, I've got my mixed group in Buffalo, New York, and I'll be tied up in that. And the next week I'll be in Yellowstone, hopefully not getting buffaloes. We're going to be on motorcycle rides in Yellowstone in a couple weeks. So it might be a couple weeks before I'm back, but we will have a show as soon as I get back and can get in front of a camera. Hope you guys are doing well. Talk to you soon. See you. Bye.